welcome to another episode of the Man in the Middle podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Maloney. This is an Ithaca Media podcast. And today I'm really thrilled to be joined by Sash Vasilevski. He's a seasoned expert with over 20 years of experience in technology and cybersecurity. He's the founder of Security Centric, and Sash has built a reputation for helping organizations align their cybersecurity strategies with their business objectives. So ensuring that they have, security to be a true enabler of their growth and success. We're going to dive into a couple of topics today. One of them is around what Sash is passionate about, aligning that cybersecurity element to their business goals. And then also separating your IT and cybersecurity functions along with some other topics. But with that being said, Sash, I want to welcome you to the show today.
Thanks, Jeremy. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, no, it's pleasure's all mine. And I always start by asking my guests who come on this podcast how they got involved in this world of cybersecurity and technology more broadly. So, Sash, could you bring us sort of up to speed how you a bit about your background and how you got involved in tech and cybersecurity?
Great question. Let's think back to the 90s. I was taking things apart, so technology was always going to be in my future. Computers were really starting to make their way into the homes back then. So technology, computers, ended up doing a computer systems engineering degree. Partway through that, ended up with a role in an IT consultancy and worked in different areas in IT, consultant side, internal roles, large, medium, small organizations. Had a mini career in IT. Took a step back and thought maybe I'll follow my engineering roots a bit closer. So ended up at a defense contractor, working on all sorts of military systems, communication systems, things like that. In the tactical space, that was quickly coupled with my IT background to end up in the strategic space. So parts of defence, federal government, three-letter acronym agencies down in Canberra. Spent a lot of time working on tactical and strategic areas for defence and federal government. They take information security quite seriously. They've been doing it for decades before cybersecurity was hip, happening and sexy, and before it was called cybersecurity, when it was referred to as information security. So cut my teeth in those environments, saw how to implement information security effectively, and was hooked ever since.
Yeah, great. And as far as the founding of Security Centric, can you sort of fill us in on how that came about? Because I know a big part of, like we sort of mentioned at the top of the episode, was that passion between bridging that gap between businesses and the importance of cybersecurity. Tell us how that came about. So,
I had seen the way information security was being implemented for large organisations, the largest, including the largest in Australia, the Department of Defence, 120 odd thousand employees, and the methodology was sound. And what I was keen to do was extend that to organisations that perhaps didn't have the resources, the focus at the time. This is 2012 we're talking about, and take that methodology proven in classified environments, very sensitive environments, and really make that available to the broader economy. And for Security Centric, that was the mid-market. There's a lot of organisations between 100 and 1,000 seats. And cybersecurity is important to them. They have sensitive data that they don't want compromised, they don't want made unavailable and all of those things, but didn't have the resources of the Department of Defence, didn't have the resources of a lot of the agencies and federal government departments across Australia, particularly in Canberra. And so that was really the impetus to start Security Centric and really make that proven methodology available to more than just the big end of town, the banks, the defence, the large organisations, the 5, 10, 20,000 seat organisations that can solve many problems with massive budgets, massive teams, subject matter experts across the board. They just, 500 seat organisations don't have the resources to build up a cybersecurity capability as it should be, with various half a dozen at least subject matter experts, and that's where we come in to get them the same result that the Department of Defence, that large organisations get, but make it available and economically viable for the mid-market.
Yeah, and is that where this this concept, which has sort of gained a bit more traction over the years, of CISO-as-a-Service really comes into play, because you're gaining access to the expertise of taking your case of yourself and your team, where it's not so resource heavy. Is that sort of where that's gained a bit more popularity over the years?
100%, Jeremy. There is a requirement for some steering, strategic direction within an organisation around cybersecurity, how we can manage cybersecurity risks, but also how we can use that as competitive advantage or organisational advantage in more broader sense. But again, there's resource limited organisations. They can't hire a CISO. Maybe that takes up a significant portion of their cybersecurity budget. Do they need them 40 hours a week? Probably not. And so that's where the CISO-as-a-Service, it's getting all of the upside of an experienced professional who's seen many different environments, but you don't need them all day, every day, 5 days a week, 40 hours a week. It needs to be right-sized, and trying to fill a part-time position, you make other compromises where you have someone who's either potentially distracted or making other compromises. They don't have that breadth and depth of experience. It's not as attractive to people in that want to pursue that particular career track as well. So the other alternatives, contractors, essentially hiring bodies, you don't get that same buy-in. And so what we've tried to do is really replicate all of the plus points, the advantages of having that full-time permanent CISO resource within your organisation, getting them part-time, getting them getting cost savings, obviously.
Yeah, and how do you find that integration process within an organization? Because security is so important and critical to an organization, and a big piece of that is trust. How do you find that integration of a part-time CISO coming into an organization to sort of like really integrate themselves to feel a part of the whole?
That's one of the most important parts of the process. It's also a reason why that particular construct delivery method is really attractive, is how well we integrate compared to some of the other options available in terms of contracting, body shopping, things like that. The way that the onboarding works, the way that the engagement works is they really do become part of the organisation. Their timesheets might not show 40 hours a week, but they're part of the organisation. They're on the org chart in most cases. They have local accounts, email accounts. They interact with staff, third-party suppliers, vendors, customers in exactly the same way that an internal CISO resource would. that's encouraged from day one. And so rather than here is an external resource and people having to relay information, they're really brought in. They're brought into, in many cases, town halls or company stand-ups where a CEO might present where the company is headed at the moment in terms of their vision and strategic initiatives. They'll bring in their CISO in to deliver on security initiatives. That might be internal, that might be customer-facing cybersecurity initiatives, but they'll come in and present alongside the CEO at those town halls as exactly the same role. And so, from day one, the organisation, people within the organisation see that role referred to, used, invited as an internal role. And so there is an implicit understanding, regardless of what direction you give staff, there's this implicit observed understanding that actually they're acting, behaving, appearing exactly like one of the team, one of the management team. So we'll treat them as such. The other part, and something that we've adopted over the last couple of years, is there isn't, from a commercial construct perspective, set number of hours. There isn't here's a retainer, here's some hours. Once you've used that CISO, you're out of hours for the week or month. We thought that was limiting, and it really undermined the entire reason for having that CISO, and that is treat them to get ahead of the curve, use them before there's a problem to avoid a problem, not to clean up the mess. And so, much like a full-time CISO, they're there. They're there for you whenever you need them. And maybe a full-time internal CISO has quiet weeks and they have busier weeks. That's the same with our CISOs. They're unlimited. Use them as much as you want, and they will have quiet weeks and they will have busy weeks. But what we want you to do is involve them at the whiteboard stage, before there's a problem, before you go away and implement a new system or change to the way your organization works. You've brought in some suppliers, they've gone through and tested and integrated, and you're about to go into production, and now you tap the CISO on the shoulder and want their blessing, their checks, and by this stage you might have all sorts of fundamental architectural issues. You have to wind that back, or you have to run with some of that residual risk because you waited too long. And when you have a cap on leaning on that resource, that's what happens. It's just human nature. If you have a finite amount of something, you try and safeguard it. And that undermines the very purpose of a CISO, which is to help steer and guide and have you thought about X and Y early on. And so engaging them really early on is important. We've changed the way that that service is delivered because of human nature. We encourage use that as much as you can. That's how you're going to get a real benefit. It's very hard to quantify that because you're avoiding problems down the road. You're avoiding risk. You're avoiding potential incidents, breaches. But you're also, what's difficult to quantify is that rework that you avoid by engaging early.
Yeah, it's a really interesting model because especially around the piece of the resource allocation, right? Because I feel like that's an important element to ensuring that integration is there, as far as the CISO being really part of the organization in the same way that if they had a full-time CISO hired within the organization. So I think that's really critical. But I wanted to ask you, Sash, around this. When it comes down to the IT departments, because usually I imagine that the companies and organizations you're working with, if they are having a an outsourced CISO-as-a-Service model, prior to that, usually it's the IT department which is having to carry the burden of of Security, and that's actually quite typical for a lot of companies of that size. So I wanted to ask you, what's the importance of separating that out? So separating that responsibility of cybersecurity away from the IT department. Why do you think that's an important feature to have?
There's a few areas, but I suppose the most important is the easiest to understand is you can't check your own homework. If I asked any technology function, IT department, however you want to refer to it, any technology function, have you deployed a system, some infrastructure, some technology? Have you deployed it securely? If we do that and ask that question 100 times, I'm going to get the same answer 100 times. Yes. Now, maybe that's the case, or maybe you shouldn't be checking your own homework. You shouldn't be reviewing your own work. So there's number one is the conflict of interest. You need to separate those functions. There is the overall remit of the technology function, ITs, to provide technology that supports the business, and your important characteristics are functionality, performance, availability, uptime, user experience. And some of those are completely at odds with the information security, the cybersecurity requirements. And so there will always be compromises made. However, if a technology function is on the hook for customer experience and functionality, there is what we often see is there are compromises made that introduce cybersecurity risks, because the technology function is measured upon different things. Different things are functionality, performance, user experience, things like that. And so that function needs to be separated from a conflict of interest perspective, as well as what is your overall remit. And your remit is not risk in many cases around the technology side. The focus isn't. The second reason is subject matter expertise. There are Exchange experts, SharePoint experts, there's experts in AI, generative AI coming out of the woodwork, mailbox migrations, email migrations into the cloud, use of orchestration, containerization in public cloud, your AWS, your Azure. There's a lot of technology there. There's a lot of knowledge and experience in terms of how do I provide this function? How do I provide it with a great user experience? How do I make it reliable, available? How do I make it perform and scale? That's a lot to know. We don't know that. To tack on all of the areas of cybersecurity, it's just an unrealistic expectation to also have that depth of experience and knowledge. We have a large team, and within that team we have sub teams. Within those specialist business units, we also have individuals with areas of expertise. All we do is cybersecurity, and we still need to have those differing areas of subject matter expertise and that depth of knowledge to do it well. To expect the technology professionals who also need to know the ins and outs of Azure architecture, AWS APIs, the ins and outs of SharePoint and how to integrate that with modern business applications. There's just too much to know. And so you have a generalist approach taken by technologists around cybersecurity. I'm giving an interface. Here's a product. It sounds all relatively straightforward. An example we might use is Microsoft 365, heavily used by most organizations, heavily used by the technology function. I've got admin portals. I'm familiar with those admin portals. I can secure Microsoft 365. 90% of the security parameters necessary to adequately secure and deploy Microsoft 365 are PowerShell only. And so that in itself, we have subject matter experts that know the ins and outs of each one of those parameters and how that's used and how that might be used to gain an initial foothold into a cloud, essentially someone else's cloud system that holds a lot of sensitive data. MFA bypasses are one of the common ones that we've seen doing the rounds a few years ago, and it's because the technology function was deploying those systems, but they didn't have the adequate depth of knowledge to secure those systems other than what made sense within a portal if I was to be a little bit unfair. And so you've got that conflict of interest, that differing remit in terms of what that function is trying to achieve, as well as the depth of knowledge required to do it well. We can't do any of those migrations, any of that functionality. There are some slick systems we've seen implemented within our customers by the technology partner. Super impressive. That's their space. Cybersecurity is our space. And so what we see with the astute leaders and what I'm not the hands-on. I'm playing with tools and deploying systems, and really in the weeds. But those leading a technology function, leaders within, more broader leaders within an organisation, the astute ones know. They know we need to separate those functions, and they will, in the mid-market, they will choose a technology partner and a cybersecurity partner, and those three organisations work well together for a common outcome, and that is to deliver world-class systems, functionality to support business objectives, and to do that reliably, securely. And there's definitely some leaders who have a very good view on separating those functions, and a lot of them come from enterprise. A lot of them come from a finance background, where that's normal, where you separate who puts the accounts together from the auditors, and that's slowly starting to be adopted by those who have a bit more business nous, even though it's convenient for an all-in-one. It's convenient to have one organisation deliver all of those things. They just recognise that it's a short-term convenience, and those with business now separate those two functions.
Yeah, that's great, Sash. And you, like, towards the end there, you're alluding to one of the other areas we wanted to talk about, which is that that alignment of cybersecurity to business objectives, because quite commonly, I mean, even just towards the end, they use the word convenience. Like it's a case of cybersecurity can be easily viewed as an obstacle or a burden for companies, but I know, like yourself and a lot of others out there in this space, have this passion for like it's about aligning it to the vision of the company and what the strategy and direction should be. So could you talk a bit about that, around how you are able to effectively align the cybersecurity strategy to whatever the business objectives are as a whole?
I think it's common that the cybersecurity function says no. No, you can't do that. Here is a control that stops you from doing something, and there is it develops over time somewhat a myopic view of things. But an organisation, most organisations, do not exist because of cybersecurity. Ours does, but most don't. We have clients that are in the legal space. We have clients that are in the dairy space. They milk cows and create products that consumers love. They're not in the business of cybersecurity, and so the cybersecurity industry, many professionals need to be reminded of that fact. And so rather than saying, no, you can't do that, that's you're cutting the nose to spite the face there. You're undermining your organization's ability to perform by saying no. And so cybersecurity practitioners, whether it's external or internal, really need to take the view of yes, if you want to move something to the cloud, you want to use BYOD, you want customers, partners, contractors, whatever that may be, accessing certain systems or data sets, yes, if. There are risks, and those risks can't be ignored. They need to be mitigated, but that's the challenge, is to support business objectives by being as transparent as possible. The way that we operate is if we can allow a new initiative, might be a system, way of working, whatever that may be, if that can occur and the users don't know that there's a cybersecurity overlay on that, we've done our job. We've been seamless. Now, that's not always the case. Sometimes there is an impact on something, user experience perhaps, sometimes, but as seamless as possible. So yes, if is important. It also comes down to leadership, and here is what we're trying to do as an organisation. Here's what where we're trying to get to. It's the standard CEO remit of here's the vision, here's what we're going to do, how we're going to do it. We're going to end up at this place, and the cybersecurity function needs to know about that and be creative, professionally creative in how can we support that. Otherwise, we're hindering the success of the organisation that, for the most part, doesn't exist for cybersecurity, it exists for something else. Its core purpose, focus on that core purpose, not saying no because of something you read on the internet about an advanced persistent threat by nation-state actors that sounds cool in a cybersecurity blog, but does it really impact your organisation? Are you going to impact the success of your organisation because of something that's borderline applicable to that organisation? I don't think so.
Yeah, and is it a case of having that ability to really effectively communicate that to the business leaders, like in a language that is applicable to them? And if so, like I guess how do you how do you put it to businesses and business leaders in a way that is linked to ROI, or like linking it to like a particular initiative that they're looking to implement?
ROI is a good one. We see some fairly sometimes simple views from certain industries, financial services. They need to plot out an investment. They will do a net present value and see what the ROI is, what the return on equity is. Factor in many quantitative financial factors, and that's difficult initially to do with cybersecurity. But really, competitive advantage is one that shouldn't be discounted. A lot of the clients we work with, some global SaaS providers, use cybersecurity to open up markets or to establish themselves with a market differentiation. In some cases, consumers of these products want their job to be their procurement exercise to be made simply. And so simple examples are if you have certain compliance frameworks, certifications in place. Australian government is a great example of this, where they will choose systems, products that have gone through the IRAP compliance process over systems that haven't, because the due diligence, the risk assessment process is far more involved. And so providers of systems, products, platforms that have gone through this compliance framework are at a competitive advantage. And so that's a very simple business case of here's an investment, one-off to get us to that point. here is the ongoing operational cost of that framework, and here is the market size that we're able to open up because of that. Here is putting ourselves ahead of some of our competitors. We've seen that happen in certain industries where there's a couple of really standout products. There's a couple of also-rans. The also-rans have had very easy to consume security posture for what is a procurement department. And so they perhaps don't understand the functional differences. But this ticks my boxes from a compliance perspective. So we've seen suboptimal product selection purely because they tick the cybersecurity boxes better than products that were far more superior from a functionality perspective. User experience solved my underlying problem better, but they didn't get selected. The other side of that in terms of ROI is risk management 101, which is here are some scenarios that might occur. Here is what the impact is on the organization, and essentially what you're doing is evaluating risks for risk against your risk appetite. And that risk appetite, very easy concept, but there needs to be some quantifiable measures against that risk appetite. That might be types of scenarios, it might be financial impact, it might be time of downtime, it might be certain scenarios that lead to reputational impact. Not all reputational impact is as severe as others, and so really it's then making a business call. It's going to cost this to reduce the risk of a threat from eventuating. Here is how often that's going to occur. Here is the impact. Do a little bit of maths, and you get a really clear ROI on, if I spend 10K here, I'm going to save 100K every three or 4 years. That maths is very, very easy to make. Not all risk needs to be mitigated or reduced. We cross the road every day. There's a risk of getting hit by a car. I will cross a quiet one-lane road down the road here in the CBD with no more than a left and right look as my risk mitigation. There's no way I'm crossing the Harbour Bridge 10 lanes, 12 lanes, whatever it is, in peak hour traffic. That is way outside of my risk appetite. And so it's really quantifying what is that impact to the organisation. Are we okay with that? If we lose a laptop, okay, it's inconvenient. Maybe we run a little bit of encryption to protect the data, but otherwise we lose a little bit of money, a little bit of downtime for an employee. That's okay. Versus here's a production database with customer data, with health information, medical information for the last 15 years. And in one case, our testers were able to uncover that said database connected to the internet and be able to access that full database of a decade plus of health information. That's not a risk that I would want to hold. Our job is to communicate that risk to the business, and in this particular case, the business took that system offline until they could remediate. But there's some very clear paths from here's a technical risk, several steps to here is the business risk. Are you okay or not? And that's a business risk call, and every organisation is different.
Yeah, that's excellent. And it sounds like mixed up in all of this, it really comes down to the strategic thinking that goes behind all of these decisions, and why it is so important to have someone with that experience and expertise in order to weigh in on some of these challenges that a business might be facing, and some of the initiatives they're looking to implement. So thanks for sharing. That's really great. But I do want to sort of slightly move to a different area, Sash, as far as moving more globally and getting you to weigh in on sort of like a recent issue, and that's the CrowdStrike bug. Could you sort of just explain a little bit about that issue, and then also the broader implications it has around businesses who rely on cybersecurity services out there.
Sure, the CrowdStrike issue received a lot of media attention. It was widespread, but at the end of the day, it was less of a cybersecurity issue and more of technology in general. I won't go into the nuts and bolts, but there's all sorts of systems and processes, checkboxes that go into trying to avoid these sorts of things, and sometimes a technical issue within a complex system affects that system, and that's technology in general. There's airplanes fall out of the sky because of technical issues, and we try and learn from them and avoid them. There's systems that products in the past from endpoint vendors that have done the same, if not more significant, in terms of recoverability. So there will be technology failures, and so in this case, yes, there was a focus on cybersecurity. I think the media, like often happens, likes to jump on things. Many commentators like to jump on very, very quickly, and I'm glad a lot of those who were jumping on the bandwagon, quick to speak, really had a negative experience from that, where they're trying to get exposure, they're trying to get whatever likes or shares or whatever that may be, that sort of fuels their agenda, and it ended up poorly for them. So it was a little bit of karma there, but it identifies the reliance on key pieces of technology, and risk management in general. You should always be aware of the risks, and anyone who uses an operating system, an endpoint product, a piece of hardware knows that there could be some failure in that product. What can I do to minimize the likelihood, and what can I do to minimize the impact of that occurring? CrowdStrike, they're in a space where they're making, on an almost minute by minute basis, compromises. They're compromising. They're dealing with the compromise of trying to secure from threat actors, scenarios, actions, things that haven't been seen in the wild yet, new techniques, new scenarios that need to be keeping ahead of the curve. That's a tough race to be running. And on the other side of that is availability and reliability, and making sure that we don't mess any of our systems up. And that's a tough one, because you're always going to end up in a bad position in the media. You're either brought down supermarket checkout kiosks, or you missed a cybersecurity threat that you were purchased and implemented to protect against. And sometimes you don't get that perfect, but you get it right more times than not. So there's unpacking some high level responsibility on users of these systems to really be aware that technology has failures. AWS, Azure, they have fantastic reliability. They spend more and have teams of experts that know about maintaining reliability at scale far more than any other organization, most organizations out there. That's great. That's where I'll put my money in AWS, and Amazon and Microsoft. They're having more reliable systems than our team, my small MSP's team, could ever build. But those systems still have outages. And to think that they're perfect is naive. You need to understand that those platforms, much like the CrowdStrike endpoint product, they will have issues, and that's not unknown. That nobody could say that I couldn't forecast a technology issue. it happens. You need to have appropriate processes and forward planning to understand that these things could happen and what will I do. Now, we weren't impacted apart from very, very minor sort of test systems, but when we do our risk analysis, we go, those test systems will be down until we recover that. We're okay with that. If my supermarket kiosks were down for several hours, okay, is that okay? If it's not, what can I do about it before it happens? Are there manual processes? Can we switch over? Do we have some sort of other, boot up recovery super tech involved? That will be different for different organizations. But what it highlights is technology will fail. It's not just a cybersecurity issue. Could be power, could be a flood, and diesel generators being located in the basement. The basement gets flooded. Those diesel generators can't operate. So my data center above ground that I'm perfectly happy with, and secure in my knowledge that it's above ground. Well, actually, it doesn't have power because power is down because of storms, and my basement with my power generators is flooded. So, thinking about these things ahead of the curve, it's business continuity, it's disaster recovery, it's risk management. At a fundamental level, it just happened to be a cybersecurity product in this case. Could have easily been an operating system or some other product.
Yeah, okay. Thanks for sharing. Because it sounds like sort of two big lessons out of it. Number one is like just recognizing that there's always going to be risk. Nothing's perfect, but the ability to be able to plan ahead, manage, and to sort of like use an analogy, like if we have a road that's closed off, there's signs to divert your way, and like usually there might be signs prior saying it's going to be closed on this date. So like similar to that, having that ability to make people aware and have that communication piece, and then also like related to what we were talking about earlier, having those checks and balances, and on the smaller scale with companies separating their IT and cybersecurity functions. On a larger scale, it's like making sure that other functions have checks and balances that are being checked by third parties and whatnot, right?
Look, exactly.
Yeah, yeah, fantastic. Unfortunately, we are getting to the end of this conversation, Sash. But I'll sort of want to finish up on a bit more of a personal note for you, and just sort of asking like what motivates you most to stay in this industry and keep problem solving in the cybersecurity space.
The days are long, the days are hard, the challenges are ever increasing. But I think I got into the industry because it was just so interesting. You have to be one of those people that is continuously learning. You can't sit still. If you sit still, you're going backwards. The environments, the threat actors, the techniques on the good and bad side are evolving, and that's, for me, keeps things interesting, keeps things fresh, keeps you on your toes. So that was really the initial piece. Running security centric, you get exposed to other things, and so there's when a client calls me up, and this happened a couple of months ago, where they had a contractor in, and we started with and brought in a CISO-as-a-Service, and a month later, it calls me up. I've had a little bit of involvement with him on the early end, but calls me up and says, "Wow, Sash, I have to say thank you so much. For the first time, I actually see I get some visibility into my cybersecurity posture, into my program. I know where we are, what's happening, what we need to do." And that was in a month of having these people that they do this all day, every day. They need to hit the ground running. They need to understand the lay of the land, and they need to make change. And to make change and improve things, they need to communicate clearly to management. And this was someone who was, in their own words, pulling their hair out for the last 2 years, not knowing what's happening, a real lack of visibility. getting that client feedback and saying, actually, you've moved the dial, you've improved things for the team as well as myself. That drives me, motivates me no end. Progress, essentially. And the third part is the team. Seeing how they're growing. You have some very, very bright people with absolutely ridiculous skill sets, and they're applying that across, not just one environment. It's not that they have one job and they apply their skill set in one environment. They're seeing new environments. They're seeing retail, healthcare, education, manufacturing, not-for-profit, defence, across the board, and seeing them develop both their technical and non-technical skills. There's a little bit of proud parent comparing them today versus when they joined the organisation. The cybersecurity industry needs technical skills, but they need far more non-technical skills in terms of change management, understanding the user base and their day job, and there's a lot of highly technical professionals in the industry who really we wouldn't hire because they need to develop broader than just the technical skill set. So seeing those skills develop again, development, progress, moving that needle really motivates me.
Fantastic, and I personally look forward to seeing what the future of Security Centric is like. So Sash, I really appreciate you coming on board today and sharing some of your insights with us. But before we close off, how can people find out more about yourself and also about the work that you guys do at Security Centric?
Look, the usual, securitycentric.com.au. You can find me there or LinkedIn. My name isn't particularly common, so you'll see my face there. Send me a message, connect, stay up to date with what's happening in terms of effective information security.
Fantastic. And once again, Sash, thank you for coming on the Man in the Middle podcast, and we look forward to future conversations.
Jeremy, my pleasure.